الصحابي من السنة كذا، فالأكثر أن ذلك مرفوع. ونقل ابن عبد البر فيه الاتفاق، قال وإذا قالها غير الصحابي فكذلك ما لم يضفها إلى صاحبها كسنة العمرين. وفي نقل الاتفاق نظر، فعن الشافعي في أصل المسألة قولان، وذهب إلى أنه غير مرفوع أبو بكر السيرفي من الشافعية، وأبو بكر الرازي من الحنفية، وابن حزم من أهل الظاهر، واحتجوا بأن السنة تتردد بين النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وبين غيره، وأجيبوا بأن احتمال إرادة غير النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعيد. وقد روى البخاري في صحيحه في حديث ابن شهاب عن سالم بن عبد الله بن عمر عن أبيه في قصته مع الحجاج حين قال له إن كنت تريد السنة فهجر بالصلاة. قال ابن شهاب فقلت لسالم أفعله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم؟ فقال وهل يعنون بذلك إلا سنته؟ فنقل سالم وهو أحد الفقهاء السبعة من أهل المدينة وأحد الحفاظ من التابعين عن الصحابة أنهم إذا أطلقوا السنة لا يريدون بذلك إلا سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah now moves on to discuss words which are attributed to the Prophet, which are not attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in any way. So not directly and not indirectly. In the previous lesson, we done words which were indirectly attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But here, these are words which are not attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in any way. So these words, there is doubt on it because they could be marfu' and they could be mawquf. They could be from the Prophet attributing it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or it could be that the person is attributing it to the Sahaba, because they have the scope of being either. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وَمِنَ السِّيَغِ الْمُحْتَمَلَةِ, that words which have a doubt or the possibility يَكُونَ مَرْفُوعًا أو مَوْقُوفًا, that they could be marfu' attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they could be mawquf. Words, for example, like where a Sahabi says, مِنَ السُّنَّةِ كَذَا. So if a Sahabi has to say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if a Sahabi has to say that such and such an action is a Sunnah. Now, we know the literal meaning of Sunnah is that it could be referred to anybody's practice. But if a Sahabi is saying it, then it would mean, so it has the possibility of being the Sunnah of anyone, of a fellow Sahabi. Or it has the possibility of also being the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The very famous example of this is the narration of Sunan Abi Dawud, من السنة وضع الكف على الكف في الصلاة تحت السرة. The Hanafis proof, Ali radiallahu anhu said that the Sunnah for males is to place the palm on the palm below the navel when performing a salah. Besides thus, there are lots and lots of other examples. When you page through the books of Ḥadīth, you will find ample examples. So when a Sahabi has to say that مِنَ السُّنَّةِ كَذَا, that such and such an action is a Sunnah, then it has the possibility of being either mawquf or marfu'. Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, فَالْأَكْثَرْ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ مَرْفُوعٌ. According to majority of scholars, they are of the opinion that it will be considered as marfu'. That a Sahabi would only use these words, the word Sunnah, when attributing something to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is how Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned it. Alama Laqani rahmallah says, سواء قاله في عصر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو بعده بقريب أو ببعيد وسواء قاله الصحابي في محل الاحتجاج به أم لا. So whether the Sahabi said it in the era of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even if he said it just after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but then it could be argued that maybe it's after the demise, shortly after the demise, that's why he's only referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So then he says, "Oh, biba'id," even if it's a lengthy period after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's broad and it's general. That in all cases, at any time, if a Sahabi had to say that a particular action is Sunnah, then it refers to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's the reason for this here? لأن الظاهر أنهم لا يريدون بالسنة عند الإطلاق إلا سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because it's apparent that when they use this word Sunnah, just like that, then they only intend the Sunnah of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. واحتمال أن يريد سنة غير النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كسنة البلد بعيد مع أن الأصل خلافه. And to say now that no, maybe it's possible that they're meaning someone else's Sunnah, that kind of a possibility is far-fetched. And also when you study the practice, you find that they would use the word sunnah only for the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as we can see, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah attributed it to the majority. He did not say it's the view of all scholars, he said it's the view of majority of the scholars. So now he mentions that Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he said there is ittifaq on this view. He said that all scholars hold this opinion. وَنَقَلَ ابْنُ عَبْدِ الْبَرِّ فِيهِ الْإِتِّفَاقِ. Before Ibn Abdul Barr, there were other senior scholars as well who also attributed this view to everyone. Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah says وَأَطْلَقَ الْحَاكِمْ وَالْبَيْهَقِي اتِّفَاقَ أَهْلِ النَّقْلِ عَلَى الرَّفْعِ. That Imam Hakim rahimahullah and Imam Bayhaqi rahimahullah, they also have said that there is ittifaq, but yes, they said ittifaq أهل النقل, that the ittifaq amongst the muhaddithin. And Allama Sakhawi rahimahullah said that some have said that there's only ikhtilaf with regards to Abu Bakr radiyallahu anh, because if after Abu Bakr radiyallahu anh, if anyone has to use these words, so basically they have this kind of opinions. But if we have to go to Imam Hakim rahimahullah's exact words, so we find in the Mustadrak, he brought the narration which goes to Ibn Ajlan أنه سمع سعيد بن أبي سعيد يقول صلى بن ابن عباس على جنازة فجهر بالحمد لله ثم قال إنما جهرت لتعلموا أنها سنة. So this is how the words come in the narration. Now the comments of Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he said وقد أجمعوا أن قول الصحابي سنة حديث مسند. That they have ijma'. So when he's saying ajma'u, then you can see that Mullah al-Qari is mentioning that it actually refers, the marja of the zamir, it's actually referring to muhaddithin. That muhaddithin have this here. So we'll come back to that point. Likewise, Imam Bayhaqi rahimahullah, he has also said, he said, لا خلاف بين أهل النقل أن الصحابي إذا قال أمرنا أو نهينا أو من السنة كذا أنه يكون حديثا مسندا. So there were these scholars who also mentioned the siyam. Especially if it's one of the senior companions who mentioned that a particular thing is a sunnah. When teaching this lesson, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah said here that وَمِنَ الْوُجُوهِ الْمُرَجَّحَ بِأَنَّهَا سُنَّةَ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا قالها كبراء الصحابة كأبي بكر رضي الله عنه مثلا إذ ليس قبله إلا سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Before Abu Bakr رضي الله عنه, the only sunnah is the sunnah of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So if it is Abu Bakr رضي الله عنه, or as we just quoted now, that in the era of Abu Bakr رضي الله عنه, then all the more reason to mention that it refers to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Likewise, if the Sahabi is mentioning it for ihtijaj, like someone is asking him or objecting on him or inquiring from him, and he's mentioning it as a proof, and he's mentioning it at the time of ihtijaj. Why? Because the Sahaba were mujtahids. وَالْمُجْتَهِدْ لَا يُقَلِّدُ مُجْتَهِدًا آخر فَيُصْرَفُ إِلَى سُنَّةِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned when he was teaching this. So all this here is with regards to a Sahabi using the word min as-Sunnah. وَإِذَا قَالَهَا غَيْرُ الصَّحَابِ فَكَذَلِكَ. And if anyone else besides a Sahabi has to say it, then the same ruling would apply. So in our copies it has these words غَيْرُ الصَّحَابِ. However, in the copy of Allama Qasim, it has فَإِذَا قَالَهَا غَيْرُ التَّابِعِ. And therefore he commented here and he said إِذَا قَالَهَا غَيْرُ التَّابِعِ فَكَذَلِكَ يَظْهَرُ مِنْهُ أَنَّ هَذَا مِنَ التَّنْبِيهِ مِنَ الْأَدْنَى عَلَى الْأَعْلَى فَإِذَا قَالَهَا التَّابِعِ فَهُوَ مِنْ بَابِ أَوْلَى. So he's said that Ibn Hajar is saying that if a tabi'i has to say min as-Sunnah, then it will have the same ruling. So Allama Qasim is saying that if someone besides a tabi'i, lower than a tabi'i, has to say it, then all the more reason. If a tabi'i uses the word min as-Sunnah, fadarja awla, all the more reason it will be marfu'. But Mullah al-Qari says وَهُوَ مُخَالِفٌ لِلنُّسَخِ الْمُتَعَمِّدَةِ. So based on this here, if anyone in any era has to use the word sunnah, then the default is that it refers to the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Allama al-Qani passed a comment and he said, وَفِي تَعْدِيَةِ هَذَا الْحُكْمِ لِمَنْ دُونَ تَابِعِيِّ نَظَرٌ. He's saying that it's not correct to say that anyone after the tabi'in. But he says that someone mentioned it, but he cannot recall who said it. وَلَا يَحُزُرُنِي الْآنْ مَنْ نَصَّ عَلَيْهِ. So he's saying that I cannot recall who mentioned this here, but if someone besides the tabi'i. But obviously urf will also play a big role. For example, in our circles, if we have to say something is sunnah, then no one will doubt that we are referring to, no one will think that we are referring to someone else besides the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will know that when we are saying something is sunnah, then we are referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So according to the statement of Ibn Abdul Barr, there is no difference of opinion that anyone, whether it's a Sahabi, whether it's a Tabi'i, whether it's anybody else, if anyone has to use the word min as-Sunnah, then the default is that it refers to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This here is, if he just uses the word Sunnah in the general sense, he doesn't qualify it with anything else. If he has to qualify it and if he has to attribute it to others, then it will take the literal meaning and it will refer to their practice. So this is what Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah then mentions. He says, مَا لَمْ يُضِفْهَا إِلَى صَاحِبِهَا. As long as he does not attribute it to another person. For example, he says, كَسُنَّةِ الْعُمْرَيْنِ. So now what's referred to by Umrayn? It refers to Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu and Umar radiyallahu anhu. Abu Bakr wa Umar radiyallahu anhuma. وَغَلَبَ عُمَرُ لِكَوْنِهِ أَخَفُ وَأَخْصَرُ. So the reason, if it refers to Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhu, then why are we not saying Bakrain? Why are we saying Umrain? When we know that Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was superior to Umar radiyallahu anhu. So the reason is because it's a shorter word and it's easier. And also, like you see that between the sun and the moon, you see Qamarain. So in the same way, so if a person has to use the word Sunnah, and is attributing it to Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu or Umar radiyallahu anhu or anybody else, he's saying this is the Sunnah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, for example. Now, it's very clear that it does not refer to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he is making it mudaf, he is attributing it, and he's clearly mentioning whose practice it was. So obviously talking the Arabic language, he's using the word Sunnah in the literal sense. So this is what Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah mentioned. Allama Ibn Hajar rahimahullah comments on this view of Ibn Abdul Barr, and he says, وَفِي نَقْلِ الْإِتِّفَاقِ نَظْرٌ. So you can see here that they take note of the words نَقْلُ الْإِتِّفَاق. That Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is not objecting on the view that Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah had with regards to min as-Sunnah. He does not deny that when a person has to say min as-Sunnah, then it refers to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Hajar, he agrees with that. But what he is objecting on saying that it's the view of everyone. That's what he has the problem with. He's saying that yes, it's his personal view, and the view of the majority is that it does refer to marfu' narrations. But we cannot say it's the view of everybody. Because he's saying that there were others who held a different view. So he explained the ikhtilaf and who were those others who held a contrary view. He says, فَعَنِ الشَّافِعِيِّ فِي أَصْلِ الْمَسْأَلَةِ قَوْلَانِ. He's saying, from Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, there are two views. So Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah explains the two views of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. He says, فَفِي الْقَدِيمِ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ مَرْفُوعٌ. So according to his older view, in his qadim, he was of the opinion that it is a marfu'. So irrespective whether إِذَا صَدَرَ مِنَ الصَّحَابِ أَوِ التَّابِعِ, whether it's from a Sahabi or whether it's from a Tabi'i, he was of the view that it will be considered as marfu', just like Jumhur, just like Akthar. ثم رجع عنه وقال في الجديد ليس بمرفوع. But then he made ruju from that view, and according to his recent view, his newer view, the view which he had now towards the end of his life, it was that it's not going to be considered as marfu'. So he's contradicting the Jumhur. And this is also how Allama Qurani rahmallah mentioned in the footnotes. So if you have the print of Tab'a ibn Kathir, then he said, أحدهما قديم وهو أنه إذا صدر من الصحابي أو التابعي فهو مرفوع والآخر جديد وهو أنه ليس بمرفوع. This is what they mention. And you can see Ibn Hajar is also mentioning that there are two views. However, amongst the Shafi'i scholars themselves, there is a debate on which was the Qadim view and which was the Jadid view. So to give you a brief overview, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah basically in his Kitabul he bases a few masail on the word Sunnah. So for example, especially when Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib used the word Sunnah, then he bases a ruling on that. That means he's considering it as a marfu' narration just because Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib used the word Sunnah. And bear in mind that Kitabul has his views which are Jadid. So to give one example, Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, he initially held the view that the diya of a female is exactly the same as the diya of a male until it reaches 1/3. And if it exceeds 1/3, then it is reduced to half. So this was his view, that the diya of so if you harm a female, you have to give her exactly the same money you have to pay as if you harm a male. But until it reaches 1/3, then it's reduced to half. But according to the other three mazahib, in all circumstances, the diya of a female is half of the diya of a male. So they don't have this view that it first goes to 1/3 and then it's reduced to half. Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, he used the following narration of Muwatta, which Imam Malik rahmallah narrates from Rabi'at ibn Abd al-Rahman, that he says that he asked Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. So again, take into consideration Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. You know, Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, he had lots of regards for him. So he said, "Kam fi usbu' al-mar'ah." You know, that's what usbu', it could be read in nine ways. Usba, isba, whatever you want to put on, whichever i'rab on the hamza and whichever i'rab on the ba. So if a person damages unintentionally, obviously, if he damages one finger of a female, then how much should he pay? So Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, Sa'id ibn Musayyib rahmallah replied, "Ashrun min al-ibil." He must give 10 camels. So then he said, okay, and what if he breaks 2 fingers of a female? So then Sa'id ibn Musayyib said, then he must give 20 camels. So then he said, and if he breaks 3 fingers of the female, so he said then he must give 30 camels. So remember, for 3 he's saying 30. Now look, he's saying, okay, and if he breaks 4 fingers of a female, he's saying now he must give 20. قَالَ عِشْرُونَ مِنَ الْإِبِلِ. So you see, it's then if he breaks 3, he has to give more. And if he breaks 4, he has to give less. So this person then said that حين عظم جرحها واشتدت مصيبتها نقص عقلها, that the harm which is caused to her and her musibat is becoming greater, and you are reducing the amount which she has to get, then the person will feel that, okay, I broke 3, now I have to give 3 fingers, I have to give 30 camels, let me just rather cut off the 4th finger also, so that I can give 20. So he's like raising an objection on it. So Sa'id ibn Musayyib said, "Iraqiyun anta?" That are you an Iraqi? They used to use this here in a derogatory sense, and there's a whole discussion about it. So this person, Rabi'at ibn Abi Abdurrahman, he said, "Bal alimun mutatabbit aw jahilun muta'allim." Look at how what a good answer he gave. He said, it doesn't matter whether I'm from Iraq or not. I am either one who knows and I just want to make sure, and if I don't know, then I'm a jahil, I want to learn from you. So then Sa'id ibn Musayyib said, "Hiya sunnah ya bana akhi." That it is sunnah. So that's what he said, hiya sunnah. Now when you go to Kitabul you find Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he's passing the mas'ala according to this here. وَمِمَّا يُسْتَدَلُّ بِهِ عَلَى سَوَابِ قَوْلِ عُمَرَ وَعَلِي أَنَّ الْمَرْأَةَ إِذَا قُطِعَتْ إِصْبُعَهَا خَطَأً وَجَبَ عَلَى قَاطِعَهَا فِي قَوْلِ أَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ عُشْرُ دِيَةِ الرَّجُلِ فإن قطع إصبعين وجب عليه 10 الدية، فإن قطع 3 أصابع وجب عليه 13 الدية، فإن قطع 4 أصابع وجب عليه 10 الدية. So you can see then he's saying فإن عظمت الجراحة قل العقل. That even though the damage to her is increasing, but the amount to pay is becoming less. So then after that, on the next page, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah commented and said, فلما قال ابن المسيب هي السنة أشبه أن يكون عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو عن عامة من أصحابه. So this is what he's mentioning, that when Ibn Musayyib is using the words, is saying that it's sunnah, then it's could either be from the Prophet ﷺ or from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And then he mentions another proof from Zayd radiallahu anhu, and then after he comes back to this proof and says, وَلَا يَكُونُ فِيمَا قَالَ سَعِيد السُّنَّةِ إِذَا كَانَتْ تُخَالِفُ الْقِيَاسِ وَالْعَقْلِ إِلَّا أَنْ عِلْمِ اتِّبَاعٍ فِيمَا نَرَى. Sa'id, obviously this doesn't make sense. It goes against logic. So he's saying that it has to be because of following the Prophet ﷺ. So that is what he mentioned. Now, after mentioning this here in Kitabul which he mentioned is his books, his Jadid books, so he's clearly mentioning that this was his own opinion. He said, وَقَدْ كُنَّا نَقُولُ بِهِ عَلَى هَذَا الْمَعْنَى ثُمَّ وَقَفْتُ عَنْهُ وَأَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى الْخِيَرَ مِنْ قِبَلِ أَنَّا قَدْ نَجِدُ مِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولَ السُّنَّةِ ثُمَّ لَا نَجِدُ لِقَوْلِهِ السُّنَّةِ نَفَاذًا بِأَنَّهَا عَنِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. He's saying that we used to pass our opinion, the ruling according to this here. However, we then found many using the word sunnah, but we cannot find any validity that it is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, when you look at this entire text, it's and which is one text from many other texts, then you understand that there are various ways to understand what exactly was the proof of Imam Shafi'i and exactly how Imam Shafi'i rahmallah is applying that proof. Because then there are other proofs which need to be taken into consideration, etc. So because of this here, now you have Shafi'i scholars who all are differing. There are those Shafi'i scholars who mention that no, within the Shafi'i, there are those Shafi'i scholars who have the opinion that Imam Shafi'i rahmallah only had one view. And throughout time, his view was the same as the view as Jumhur. So they don't look at this here, that Imam Shafi'i rahmallah is saying that ثُمَّ وَقَفْتُ عنه وأسأل الله تعالى الخير من قبل أن قد نجد منهم من يقول السنة ثم نجد لقول السنة نفاذا بأنها عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. They don't look at that fact. And it's very, very senior Shafi'i scholars who understood the madhab of Imam Shafi'i. We just quoted now earlier that Imam Bayhaqi rahmallah attributed it, and you know Imam Bayhaqi rahmallah was أعلم الناس بمذهب الشافعي. Likewise, so in Al-Bahr al-Muhit, al-Zarkashi rahmallah mentions from various scholars. He mentions from Abu Tayyib al-Tabari, he mentions from Ibn Sam'ani, that they, whenever a person says min as-Sunnah, then it refers to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he mentions from those two scholars, but then he mentions other scholars who create this distinction between the Qadim and the Jadid view. So one of the scholars is Ibn Fawrak. So he says that if the Qadim view was like, if Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, if a Sahabi said min as-Sunnah, then it refers to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Jadid view is يجوز يقال ذلك عن على معنى سنة البلد وسنة الأئمة فلا نجعله أصلا حتى يعلم. So this was Ibn Fawrak. Then there were others within the Shafi'i madhab who said yes, there is this distinction between Jadid and Qadim view. However, the Qadim view was that it's the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Jadid view is that there's tawaqquf. So this is what they are saying. It's differs slightly because Prat Ibn Fawrak said, he said, فَلَا نَجْعَلُهُ أَصْلًا حَتَّى يُعْلَمْ. And they are saying there's a tawaqquf. So he quotes from Alama Maziri, Rahmallah, etc., and Salim al-Razi, so many senior Shafi'i scholars. But then after quoting all of this here, Alama Zarkashi, Rahmallah, said, لَكِنْ نَصَّ الشَّافِعِيُّ فِي الْأُمِّ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْكُتُبِ الْجَدِيدَةِ عَلَى أَنَّهُ حُجَّةٌ. So he's saying, look at another place in Kitabul and that is why I quoted a different place earlier. He's saying, when you look at it under the chapter of the amount of kafan, then there Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, he uses the word that it's quoting from Ibn Abbas and the Haq ibn Qais, that لا يقولان السنة إلا لسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is what Imam Shafi'i rahmallah mentioned. So now what Alama Zarkashi says, وَحِينَ إِذٍ فَيَصِيرُ فِي الْجَدِيدِ قَوْلًا. That in his Jadid view, they are, leave alone in the Qadim, but in the Jadid view, there are two different opinions. And then he's saying that the main muftis within the Shafi'i madhab, so Alama Rafi'i and Alama Nawawi rahmallah, both of them, they felt that when narration has min as-Sunnah, then it is a marfu', and therefore, they were applying the laws of the Shafi'i madhab and going through the dalail of the Shafi'i madhab, and this is their conclusion, that it's actually treated as marfu' narrations. وَجَرَى عَلَيْهِ الْأَمَدِ وَالْإِمَامِ وَالْمُتَأَخِّرُونَ. So you can see that there are so many scholars and senior scholars within the Shafi'i madhab who said that there is only one view within the Shafi'i madhab. Now we find that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, here he's mentioned فَعَنِ الشَّافِعِيِّ فِي أَصْلِ الْمَسْأَلَةِ قَوْلًا. In his nukat, he actually mentioned that within his jadid that there are two qawls. So they, in his nukat, he said, قال الشافعي الذي يجب قول سعيد سنة أن يكون أراد سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وحينئذ فله في الجديد قولان. That in his jadid he has two views. And if it's within his jadid, then the Shafi'i muftis obviously will be split. Some will give preference to this and some will give preference to that. Nevertheless, it is not conclusive. It's debatable whether Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was really of the opinion that it will not be marfu'. So, in spite of Ibn Hajar mentioned فَعَنِ الشَّافِعِيِّ فِي أَصْلِ الْمَسْأَلَةِ قَوْلًا, there are many senior Shafi'i scholars who felt that there is only one view within the Shafi'i madhab. Thereafter he says وَذَهَبَ إِلَى أَنَّهُ غَيْرُ مَرْفُوعٍ أَبُو بَكْرَ السَّيْرَفِي مِنَ الشَّافِعِيَّةِ. So he was obviously a sharih of Kitab al-Umm. So he knew what Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is mentioning within his jadid view. Thereafter he says وَأَبُو بَكْرَ الرَّازِي مِنَ الْحَنَفِيَّةِ. So in Al-Fusul fil Usul, he brings باب قول الصحابي أمرنا بكذا ونهينا عن كذا والسنة كذا. So he says قول السنة كذا لا يجوز أن يجعل شيئا منه رواية عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He's saying that if they have to use this kind of words, you cannot just conclusively mention that or think that he is referring to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وابن حزم من أهل الظاهر, and Ibn Hazm rahmallah as well. So they were all of the opinion that the word min as-Sunnah does not necessarily mean that it is the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and hence it cannot be treated as a marfu' narration. Therefore, if you have a Sahabi saying something min as-Sunnah, you cannot really use it as a dalil. You cannot use it for istidlal. So there are so many different scholars here, but as you could see that from Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, on the one hand, there is there's a difference of opinion, and these other scholars, it's just usuliyun, they are not muhaddithun. Therefore, we could interpret the words of Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah to refer to ittifaq amongst the muhaddithin. Like we mentioned, that the Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he just said ajma'u, and we are saying that the marja of the zamir ajma'u refers to muhaddithin. So how are we making a ta'wil for him and saying that ajma'al muhaddithin? He just said ajma'u. There's no reason to confine it to muhaddithun. We could say that he's referring to everybody, but we made the ta'wil for Imam Hakim rahimahullah. So in the same way, we can make the same ta'wil for Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, and saying that Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah is also referring to ittifaq amongst the muhaddithin. He says وقد نقل الاتفاق غير ابن عبد البر أيضا. This is Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim says فقد نقل الاتفاق غير ابن عبد البر أيضا فنقله الحاكم ثم تلميذه البيهقي لكنهما قيدا الاتفاق بأهل النقل يعني المحدثين فيمكن حمل كلام ابن عبد البر عليه ولا يعترض عليه بمن ذكرهم ابن حجر. You see that we can also then make the same interpretation for Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, and saying that when he is saying that there is ittifaq, then he is referring ittifaq amongst the muhaddithin. So now why would these scholars do this? Why would they refer to Sunnah? Why would they not think that Sunnah could refer to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Ibn Hajar rahimahullah cites their reasoning and their proofs. وَاحْتَجُّوا بِأَنَّ السُّنَّةَ تَتَرَدَّدُ بَيْنَ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم وَبَيْنَ غَيْرِهِ. They use as proof that the word Sunnah is used for the Prophet ﷺ and it is also used for others. So Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah says, مِنَ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ, because you know the famous narration, عَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةَ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ بَعْدِي. So like this here, likewise, in Al-Fusul, there's so many different proofs which are given where the word Sunnah, سَنَّ لَكُمْ مُعَاذٌ سُنَّةً حَسَنًا مَنْ سُنَّ سُنَّةً حَسَنَةً فَلَهُ أَجْرًا. So like this, all these narrations, it shows that the word Sunnah is being used for others besides the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So then Ibn Hajar rahimahullah responds to this here. Inshallah, we'll go through that response in the next lesson. Until Thursday, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.